Good morning, everyone from wonderful Zurich. Good afternoon to the participants calling in from Asia. A very warm welcome to everyone. It's good to have you with us. So, my name is Jiri Hinnen. I'm your host today and the moderator. I'm the head of global cargo sales of Swissware Cargo, and I have the pleasure of leading you through today's seminar. So, it's a pleasure again to have you with us for this very exciting seminar on a topic that's really crucial for us, sustainability. So it's at the heart of Swissware Cargo, and it's an exciting but very challenging topic. And so at Swissware Cargo, we really believe that the road to a sustainable future cannot be traveled alone. We have to build on partnerships to achieve what we set out to achieve. And this webinar we have today is a testament to this, because I'm very happy that we have two of our key partners with us in this webinar. We have Kühne Nagel and Climeworks, who are known throughout the industry for their innovation, for their expertise, and for being at the forefront in terms of sustainability. So I'm very glad that my two colleagues are here and share what they intend to do in terms of sustainability, and not only intend to do, but what they're already doing. So again, the focus today is on partnerships, on how we go to a sustainable future through using partnerships. And before we go in, a few housekeeping rules. So this webinar is being recorded, so you can also watch it in the aftermath. And all participants are in listen-only mode, so everyone is muted, and questions can be submitted via the chat, and we try to answer as many as possible at the end of the webinar. With those we probably won't be able to answer all of the questions. Those we can't answer, we try to get back to you via email. And also, there's always a certain level of details we cannot really answer in this call, but we try again to get back to you with emails if it's a very specific question. So, and without further ado, I would briefly hand over to my colleagues to introduce themselves. And after this, we go on to the presentations. So to start off, I would ask Fabiano to briefly tell our participants who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fabiano Piccino. I'm the Global Head of Sustainability for all the air logistics at Kühne Nagel. Been in this position now for almost 3 years. I'm responsible for all the topics in sustainability, from emissions to the SAF program, new solutions, innovations, and so forth. And within the sustainability area, I'm now 14 years already.
Thank you very much. Good to have you with us today. And Laurent from Climeworks.
Thank you, Gary. Laurent Müller from Climeworks. At Climeworks, I'm Director for Corporate Partnerships. I'm leading actually our partnerships within the shipping, logistics, and aviation sectors. So the idea is to work with companies to help them remove what they cannot reduce by providing carbon dioxide removal credits to those companies. I've been working for 4 years at Climeworks. Before I was in the transportation domain, in the rail, and also in the aviation sectors. Very glad to be here. Thanks a lot to Swissware Cargo for the invitation.
Thank you for being with us. It's a pleasure. Perfect. And with this, we will start. I will now hand over to Laurent to give us an insight of what Climeworks is doing and how it's doing. And so I'm excited to hear what you're about to tell us.
Yes, with pleasure. So good morning, good afternoon again, everyone. I will speak now in the 20 next minutes about carbon dioxide removal. I will start by telling you a little bit more about our company. Perhaps that not all of you know already about Climeworks. I will speak about carbon dioxide removal. I will speak about more specifically about the direct air capture technology. And then at the end, I will explain how those technologies will contribute to the decarbonization of aviation in particular, but also to other industries. So if we move to the next slide, before going directly to a direct air capture in Climeworks, I would just perhaps repeat what is carbon dioxide removal. So carbon dioxide removal is the fact of capturing or extracting CO2 directly from the atmosphere and storing it as permanently as possible. The idea is here to neutralize fossil emissions. With fossil emissions, you do exactly the opposite. You will take actually carbon from the ground, burn it, and then release CO2 in the atmosphere. So what we do is the opposite. Should not be confused with the capture of CO2 on a concentrated source or point source capture. This is another technology. This is also important, but it's not what we are doing. We are capturing CO2 directly from the atmosphere for everything that we cannot reduce, like the emissions of planes, for instance. What you see here is what you would see if you go today to Iceland. It's our second plant in Iceland. It's called Mammoth. It's an operation. Every day it's capturing CO2 from the air and storing it permanently in the ground. Why did we choose Iceland for this plant? Mainly two reasons. The first one is that we need heat to operate our plants, and Iceland has a lot of geothermal power available in excess actually, and we have access to decarbonized, cheap heat to operate our plants. Second reason is that they have a very special geology, which is this basalt ground. We come back to this, which allows the mineralization of the CO2 that we capture, so a very permanent way to store CO2. Before going deeper into technology, I will tell you a few words about our technology. So if we go to the next slide, about our company. So in terms of direct air capture, Climeworks, we are clearly one of the world leaders on this technology. We have been developing the direct air capture technology since 16 years. Our goal is to come to the megaton scale by 2030 to have actually installed capacity allowing us to remove each year 1 million tons of CO2 from the air. We got a lot of recognition from our work, being from corporates or from states. You can see here that we got substantial subsidies from the Department of Energy, and we'll see also that we have partnerships in place with many companies. We are today the only certified direct air company operating, so we are the only one delivering already on the market direct air capture credits certified by a third party, Puro in this case, and we have also a AAA rating by V0 Carbon, which is a rating agency specialized on carbon dioxide removal. A few last words on the company on the next slide. So Climeworks heart, I would say, our core business is on direct air capture, but there are a lot of different ways to extract CO2 from the atmosphere to perform carbon dioxide removal. And we are also now operating as a carbon dioxide portfolio supplier. So we work with customers buying several types of technologies in the form of high quality portfolios. That's important, I think, to know. And finally, you can see here a little bit the typical customers we are working with. Of course, Swiss and Lufthansa from the aviation sector. We have been working a lot with the financial industry, advisory industry, and also the tech industry. And more, I would say now, with also logistics, shipping, and aviation industry. So that was about the company, and now I'm happy to tell you a bit more about the technology, about the direct air capture technology. If we move to the next slide. So how does this technology work? Yes. Sorry, before going to the next slide, on this one, just to be clear on what is carbon dioxide removal, or what is more in general a carbon credit. So carbon credits is the tradable unit which represents 1 ton of carbon dioxide which has been removed or reduced from the atmosphere. It's important to do the difference between reduced or remove. Come back to this. It's also important to know that it's tradable, so it can be transferred from one company to another one, something that can be sold along the value chain in an industry. What Climeworks is selling is carbon dioxide removal credits. That's actually our source of revenues. On the next slide, we can see the difference between carbon avoidance or reduction credits and carbon removal. So the vast majority today of the carbon credits markets is on carbon avoidance, where you pay somebody else to avoid emitting carbon somewhere else. So the typical projects here are forest protection project, where you will protect a project to avoid that it is deforested and have emissions. But at the end, the emissions of the company are still going into the atmosphere. So the net result is still that we increase the quantity of CO2 in the atmosphere. This is the vast majority of the market. This is quite cheap credits. But what we need actually is to move progressively to carbon removal. Carbon removal is actually also called negative emissions because, as I explained before, we capture CO2 out of the air, of the atmosphere. We store it permanently, so it's really allows to neutralize the emissions of a company or of an entity. And this is what is required to come to net zero. Any company having a net zero goal will need carbon removal to neutralize the emissions that this company cannot reduce completely. So I think it's important to repeat the different both. So today we are speaking, of course, only about carbon removals. So now I come to the technology. Sorry for the little confusion on direct air capture. So within, again, the carbon dioxide removal family, direct air capture is a very important member. This is how direct air capture works. So we have collectors. That's the small modules of our plants. If you see the picture behind me, you can see the collectors modules. So if we take one of those modules, we have in those modules inside the filter material that we also call sorbent, and we have fans pushing the air through those collectors, and progressively the CO2 molecules will be actually bound by this sorbent material until the point that the full surface of the filter material of the sorbent will be covered by CO2 molecules. At one point of time, it's saturated. So what we do, we close those collectors, we heat up the filter to 100 degrees, and at 100 degrees, the reverse process is happening. So the CO2 molecules will be detached from the sorbent material and are present as a gas inside those collectors. So then we just need to pump it out of those collectors, and we have the CO2 collected in the gas form. And from this point of time, then we can do the storage process. I will come back to the storage process, but just before, what are the key attributes of this technology compared to other technologies? Here you can see them. The main differentiator, I would say, compared to other carbon dioxide removal solutions is it is fully permanent. So we speak about more than 10,000 years. It's of course completely additional. It's very precisely measurable. We have everywhere on the production process sensors measuring exactly what is happening. It's scalable according to the IPCC. Direct air capture is scalable to 5 to 10 billion of tons per year, which is quite huge. It's efficient in terms of gray emissions. Of course, we have also our own emissions, but it's only 10% of what we remove. So there is a higher efficiency in terms of carbon. And last point, we are also building a new industry, which will get hopefully very large. And it's also a way to create jobs and to develop economically some regions. So among the carbon dioxide removal family, we can say that direct air capture is a very high integrity, high quality solution. And that's one of the reasons why customers choose to have direct air capture as a solution for their unavoidable emissions. On the next slide, a short introduction to the storage part. There are various ways to store the CO2 underground. There are a lot of localizations in the world that allow to do that, and storage is not the bottleneck of the technology. So the reservoirs we have available in the geology are huge. We need still to develop them, but actually that's not a bottleneck. Here, a little focus on Iceland. Iceland is super nice because it has this basaltic rock, which is a very young rock, a very reactive rock. And when we inject CO2 deep under the surface, or at 1,000 meters, something like this, into this rock, we have a natural mineralization process that will turn the CO2 within 2 years in a new mineral like limestone, which is extremely stable and can stay potentially forever in the ground in a very safe way. So this is also, in terms of quality, a very high quality, would say, process to store the CO2. So the combination of capturing the CO2 and storing the CO2 allows us actually to generate carbon dioxide removal credits that we deliver then to companies. You can go to the next slide. In terms of scale up or industrial developments, you can see here what happened so far and what we are going to do for the future. So we started in Switzerland with plants close to Zurich that were the first commercial plants in the world, the first DAC commercial plants. They were using the CO2 actually to do products, not to do carbon removal. And then we saw that the carbon removal actually market was getting traction and was for us a better source of revenues than utilizing the CO2. And that's why we decided to go to carbon dioxide removal with storage of CO2 with this first plant that we built in Iceland called Orca with a yearly capacity of 4,000 tons, which was followed last year by the launch of Mammoth that we already saw before, with a nominal capacity of 36,000 tons of storage per year. That's the so-called generation 2 of our DAC technology. How does the future look like? We are doing now a step in terms of technology. So we go to a third generation technology, increasing the efficiency of the technology, reducing the cost of this technology. We have a few locations that are here under investigation for the third generation. The initial plan is the US, but we all know that there are some question marks on the US. So we are working on alternatives also in Scandinavia, but also in Canada for the first generation 3 plants. And then the idea is that around the 2030 that we have really a large geographical expansion of the generation 3 plants through different geographies that you can see here. There are different places in the world which have this nice mix of renewable, cheap energy and possibility of storage for the CO2. The long-term goal on 2050 is that we reach something around the 1 billion ton of capacity. That's what we need according to the science to contribute to the general net zero goal of the society or the Paris Agreement goal. Now we are coming to the last part of the presentation. If you can move to the next slide. Yes, it's how does direct air capture and carbon dioxide removal contribute to the decarbonization of aviation? On this chart here, you see decarbonization roadmap that has been developed by IATA. Today, the emissions of aviation is around 1 billion ton of CO2 per year, which is approximately 3% of the global emissions. Compared to the other emissions, we know that aviation is extremely difficult to decarbonize. That's why it's called one of the hard to abate industry. So the plan of IATA here to come to net zero by 2050 is to improve the efficiency of the operations, is to have some hydrogen planes operated, and also some improvements on the efficiency and operation of the branch. And then the big two parts of this decarbonization roadmap is on one side SAF, and on the other side is carbon removal. Why do we need so much carbon removal? You see here that it's around 500 million tons. So IATA is estimating that 25% of the decarbonization of aviation will require carbon removal, which is quite huge. Why is it needed? Because SAF has some limitations. SAF has limitation on the emission reduction factor. So for instance, biofuels, they cannot reduce more than 80% of the fossil emissions when you use them. So there will always be 20% minimum with the biofuels that are still emitted along the life cycle of the fuel. And that needs to be removed if you want to come to net zero. Second reason is that biofuels have limits in terms of scalability because of biomass constraints. There will be a competition for biomass. We all know that. So it means that we will not be able to have SAF everywhere for all flights by 2050. And some of the flights may need to continue operating with fossil fuels. So SAF remains, I would say, a very strong and perhaps the most important pillar to decarbonize aviation, but carbon dioxide will be required to complement this. On top of this, you also know, perhaps you can go to the next slide, that beside the biofuels, we have also synthetic fuels that are going to contribute to the decarbonization of aviation. And those synthetic fuels will need CO2 as a feedstock to be produced. And the most straightforward way to actually get this CO2 is to take it directly from the atmosphere. So to perform direct air capture, get the CO2, and then provide it to the synthetic fuel plants to produce the synthetic fuels. This is a rather long-term objective. The PTL plants are still in development. It will be starting with gray CO2, but around 2040, we should see really these direct air capture plants associated to synthetic fuel plants producing renewable fuels for airlines. And here the challenge is to have the DAC technology at the right price and the right scale for this synthetic fuels. So the message here is let's use direct air capture today for carbon dioxide removal in order to mature the technology, to decrease the cost, to increase the capacity available. And with that, this technology will also be available for the production of synthetic fuels in the future. So that's it from my side. I hope that you could learn something on the carbon dioxide removal and direct air capture. And I'm looking forward to the questions a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurent. I always think this, when I hear this, the technology is super exciting. And also being based in Switzerland, being Swissware Cargo, of course, I'm very, let's say, proud and happy that this company was founded and built in Switzerland. And we're really, really glad that we can be one of your first partners or the first aviation partner to partner up with Climeworks. So thank you for your input. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Fabiano.
So yeah, I will show you a little overview of what we're doing in sustainability. We'll be focusing mostly on climate change, on carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas emissions, but our sustainability strategy, of course, is much more comprehensive and also focusing really on the air freight part, which is my responsibility. So if we go on the first slide, I'll show you a bit of overview for those who don't know what Kühne is and does. We are a logistics service provider, a freight forwarder, meaning we are a very asset-light company. So we don't have our own aircrafts or ships. We have a couple of trucks, but mainly we're using third parties, carriers such as Swiss to transport our goods or our customers' goods at the end. We have around 400,000 customers in over 100 countries, and that means that we are connected worldwide. We have access to a lot of different locations, a lot of different customers in a lot of different verticals or so-called industries as well. And those numbers here I'm showing, they're still relating to 2023, as the 24 report has not been released yet. It equals around 7.8 million tons of CO2 equivalents, the emissions. And if you translate that into the fuel use based on the methodologies that are used today, of course, that is around 2.2 million tons of kerosene used. That's related to the transportation of the freight we move. If we go to our vision on the next slide to show you what the importance is for sustainability for our company as a whole in our vision 2030, becoming the most trusted supply chain partner supporting a sustainable future, we see that the word sustainability is in there and highlighting the importance that we have. And that also means that we try to include it in all our operations and our structures that we have. As shown on the next slide, we have on our roadmap 2026 4 cornerstones. One of these cornerstones on the bottom right, you see it in the picture, it's there are ESGs. So sustainability is actually in there as one of the 4 cornerstones. So we have means that it's included in our strategy, in our vision, sustainability as a topic, but also included in our organizational structure. So as I told you, I'm responsible for sustainability in the air logistics. I have a team, the same that we have for the other modes of transport, the sea or the trucking part, and even the contract logistics, and then an overarching team that looks at the combination of all those modes at the corporate level, meaning that it's also included in the organizational structure, as last also the processes with our ISO certifications and our environmental management program, making sure that it's included in the strategy, the vision, the organizational structure, and the processes, so really included everywhere, which translates then also into our targets, as you can see on the next slide. That we have focused our targets for the climate change, at least according to the Science Based Targets Initiative. I'm not going now into the details of our targets right now because we submitted ours back in 2020 when there was no sectoral decarbonization for the different modes of transport, and we have one absolute detraction target. We are in the process right now of resubmitting according to those different modes of transport to be also a bit more in line with the background scenarios and the technologies available for that, and also having the net zero target then with that. So that's a process we are doing right now, but meaning that we have it try to include it from strategy, vision, organizational structure, processes, and that translates into targets. If we also look and understand our target on the next slide for our emissions profile, I said we have a very asset light company. That shows in our emissions. We are asset light. That means our scope 1 and 2 emissions are very low. It's less than 2% for the entire company as a whole. And if you look at air logistics specifically, it's even lower, meaning that most of practically all our emissions are in scope 3, and mainly it's the emissions of the carriers, in that case now of the airlines. That means it's on the one hand a little bit more difficult to measure and understand them because we don't have the direct access to the data, and on the other hand also implement solutions to reduce it as we don't have direct control over it, which makes it extremely important that we have good partnerships and collaborations with the stakeholders that are involved in there. And we have therefore a carrier sustainability engagement program specifically to make our targets more realistic and credible also to achieve those, because as I said, we need those collaborations. What does it look like on the next slide also in terms of how did we identify what are the measures or the levers to reach our targets? We have this 4+1, then also if you look at our net zero target, on the top, we have the emission data accuracy. It's extremely important that we understand and have a certain level of accuracy in the data so that we can make informed decisions, and also that we implement solutions that actually have an impact and create the right incentives. Today, it's not perfect where we are. I would say it's state of the art, but there is the room for improvement, which will help us further leverage new solutions to implement and achieve the targets. I will come to it right away. So that's the baseline or the precondition that we need to then be able to implement fuel efficiency measures. On the one hand, it's about weight reduction. It's optimization in terms of selection of the routing of the flights of the aircrafts, or also when we do optimize the loading, the palletization, and all that helps in having the same type of transportation from A to B, just using less fuel. That's why we call it the fuel efficient transportation. Everything that helps still having the same transportation, can also be modal shift or partial modal shift, but using less fuel. After that, we have the sustainable aviation fuel, which we can also call it the carbon efficiency of the transportation, meaning it's the same amount of fuel needed, but you replace a type of fuel as it emits less emissions. And as we've heard already in the presentation before, for aviation, in all the scenarios, at least for the 2050 targets, beyond that, it's maybe not the case anymore. Sustainable aviation fuel will be the single most important measure to reduce the emissions of aviation. Besides just not flying, of course, there is no other way of reducing considerably the emissions of aviation. And that also is reflected in how we approach a topic and the importance of it, but it's also a difficulty in terms of availability, scalability, and also cost. Then the fourth one, we have the sustainability beyond the flight. That's everything that's not directly related to the flight. That can be the first and last miles of the trucking, the pickup delivery within our warehouses. It can be the packaging. I have a little bit slide on it that shows a bit more than later. But just understanding, okay, we're looking at those topics, but we also need to bear in mind that the impact is not the biggest. Doesn't mean that we're not doing anything on that part. And then in the end, if you will, for where we don't have solutions yet, or the residual emissions, there we need carbon removal. We've heard it as well. All the scenarios for net zero aviation, there is the IATA that we've seen, there is from ICAO, there is from Mission Possible Partners, so many different ones where the numbers change in terms of how much is the SAF important, how much is the carbon removal important, all that, but it's clear that the carbon removal part will always be there. And so that will also be an important part to reach the net zero. And as well, we've also identified this strategy behind it. We need to help scaling, especially on the direct air capture, because it will help us in the synthetic fuel production. So it goes hand in hand, this target, and to make it commercially available and also from a cost perspective viable. So going to the next slide, we go a little bit more into the emissions. So we offer today already on a shipment level, exactly taking account which flight was taken, which carrier, which routing aircraft type, and so forth, on every shipment level, what the emissions are. It's state of the art. We use an external provider. However, it's not perfect because it's not primary data. It's model data mostly, and it uses certain averages. So there's also then, it helps already in the decision making, but we need to get better there as well, because primary data where we see differences between different carriers on the same lane, same aircraft type, because of efficiency measures that they've implemented, load factors especially also, or weight reductions, everything that they implemented is not visible today because certain assumptions are just condensed to a level where this detail is not possible today. We're working on it. We're also piloting, actually, we're with IATA together, that is working on getting a primary data from fuel emissions and data from carrier, a new calculator, and hopefully that's something that will drive us to get there where we want it. Also, there is some problems. Those who know me, they know that I always mention this topic with the methodologies, with the standards on how we allocate belly freight versus freighters. That, in our opinion, creates wrong incentives and wrong decision making. So we need to also work on fixing a standard, but that's not something that we can do internally. That's something that we need to do in collaboration, of course, with the industry. On the next slide, we'll see everything that we're trying to take, as I mentioned, a door-to-door approach in everything that we do on the delivery. There's various steps, and here's an overview of in all the steps of our of the journey, that you can see that we have implemented already solutions. Not everything is available everywhere because it depends also on location availability, on infrastructure, or even certain location, for example, offer incentives for electric trucks that is more easy to implement it on from a commercial or economic perspective. So it depends. It's very location based, all those. But we look at the pickup, then we have electric trucks, we have some with HVO, so biodiesel, if you will, and or even some pilots with hydrogen. Then in our warehouses, from the electricity generation and the use and the optimization of the pallets and the packaging, we're looking at various different solutions, but all very location specific. If it's on one place, it doesn't mean that it can also be easily replicated on the other side of the world, although we try to leverage and scale those solutions wherever possible. Then the transport from the warehouse to the airport, it's most of the times it's a very short one, so it's much easier also to implement electric solutions because it's from the infrastructure perspective or also from a distance and the range, it's more feasible, and with the ground handling. But again, during the flight, that's the most important part. It's roughly 99% of the emissions in this journey is during the flight, so we focus on that. And the single most today available solution is using sustainable aviation fuel. The other thing we do is a flight optimization. As I said, when optimizing in the selecting which routing, which aircraft, and so forth. And it's not visible correctly. So, and the last one is the sea air product, which is a product that we offer, which is a combination between sea and air, as the name says, offering the advantages of both. So in terms of timing, emissions, and cost. And then if we look a bit more in detail on the next slide about the sustainable aviation fuel, that's also a topic that's under development, and it's growing faster and faster, but it needs to go even faster in reality if you want to reach your targets, or as an industry as a whole. We have so far since 21 used almost 73 million liters of SAF. We have started back in 2021 with smaller quantities with the first trials, and over time developed the system more and more into book and claim solution. However, we strongly believe that we need to have a direct book and claim that is as close as possible to the physical reality, while also keeping still the practicality. What does that mean? Very quickly, so we only source through our carriers directly that are in our network, and they need to have physical access to the uplift location. So trying to have it as an add-on on the transportation and not create new channels there in how these certificates are handled, but really as an add-on to a transportation, so that it doesn't go into and lose credibility and go into the direction as we've seen with offsetting. We also strongly believe that it's a high credibility that's important here, traceability and transparency, and also showing where there is some lack or some inconsistencies or even rooms to improve. We issue the certificates with traceability of each single liter, where it came from which airline and which airport and which feedstock as well. Then on the next slide, we are going now at the important topic that we mentioned various times already. The collaboration of the entire value chain is of utmost importance here. We cannot solve it ourselves. The airlines cannot solve it themselves. The shippers cannot. We are interdependent on each other, and that's why it's so important in sustainability that the collaboration and transparency, in my opinion, in not just logistics, sustainability as a whole are the most important topics if you want to reach the targets. What does it mean for us as a freight forwarder? On the next slide, I put together a little bit to show what our role. We have a very special role because we're somewhere, as I see it, in between supply and demand, and we can match it because of the scale. I showed at the beginning that we have around 400,000 air freight customers. That shows that we have access to a lot of different customers in different markets, in different parts of the world, understand their needs, show and can pool a bit the demand and have the close access to them. On the other side, we have very close collaborations with the airlines, very strong partnerships there, so we can leverage there in connecting all those parts. And on the next slide, I'll show a little bit more what that means. If you start on the right side, on the shipper side or on the cargo owner, our role, as we see it, is that we may have to make the solutions for sustainability as easily accessible to the shipper as possible, make it understandable. We are supposed to be the experts to show them which solutions are possible, create new ones, have expertise, show them also in terms of credibility, which requirements and minimum characteristics need to be implemented, due diligence, and so forth, so that they can trust that we have the expertise there. Because the reality is most of the shippers don't have expertise in sustainable logistics. Why should they? Why would they? There's There's a handful who have actual sustainability experts for logistics, specifically even expertise in SAF and everything, but that's not the majority. So there we can help them, educate and provide expertise so that they can trust that what we offer is trustworthy and makes sense from a sustainability perspective. Also, now with the impact of regulation this year, we've seen with the SAF mandate and the EU ETS and others coming into place, it becomes much more complex environment. So helping them understand those topics, I think, will help a lot in creating this partnership there and making them a trustworthy partner. We then, on the other hand, we try to understand their needs. If they change, and we can offer customized solutions. We have different customers with extremely different requests, and we try to always make them possible and also make the solutions accessible to them, easily implemented. That's why the direct booking claim, that's why as an add-on to transportation, as simple as possible. And nonetheless, we can also pool demand. If we have a lot of customers with small requests, we can pool them and have a larger amount of SAF, especially, that we can request for when we go to carriers. And on the carrier side, as mentioned, we have a carrier engagement program. It is for us very important to send the signal to the carrier, hey, sustainability is not just a nice to have, it's something that we request, we have expectations. There's a clear signal from the demand side that that's something that we want and need to have, that will help them hopefully also in developing further and faster. We define requirements that they also understand. We exchange data and expertise that we're always up to date, because the carriers, of course, have a much better view on what's available and possible in the aviation topics. And together, we have already started working on developing new solutions. One of those is that we collaborate on offtakes in new technology of sustainable aviation fuel that helps scaling those new solutions faster. And there again, there is always, it's a bit of chicken and egg question. There needs to be a demand from the demand side so that they start producing, so that they get the financing from the supplier side. But no one wants to be the first one. So we try to close a bit that gap, that we can have those solutions early, especially in the synthetic fuel. That's a reality today. And that then brings me also to the next slide in the importance of the collaboration, not just up and down the value chain, but also with our peers or competitors, if you want to call it. I don't see them as competitors when it comes to the topic of sustainability, because we all need to advance those solutions, and it doesn't help if just one of us is doing it and the others don't. So there we are part of various different communities to bring in our expertise, our experience that we made in the past and that we're doing, and also to develop certain guidelines, certain standards, a common minimum agreement, because that makes it also much more credible and acceptable for everyone, and hopefully help us in getting those solutions there in reality for sooner rather than later. So also there, the collaboration is extremely important. Do you still hear me? I got a
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we hear you.
It just popped up a message about my microphone. Okay, and that brings me then also to the next slide, which is at the same time the last one, the outlook of what we're looking now in next steps. So we want to really focus on those new technologies and capacities of SAF, because there is now like a lock situation. Even though there is a mandate, we know, for the synthetic fuel, it's still, there is a lack in enough investments in making sure that those plants get their first final investment decision, and start building and having those capacities scaling up, so that the prices come down in the long term, that we can help. How can we help in this development? So we're looking really at those new technologies. We want to use more and more to leverage data with the primary data to optimize the supply chain emissions, to bring down this fuel use, or the fuel efficiency of the transportation as much as possible, because that then helps also in how much SAF is needed for the rest. And as the last point, to look more into the carbon removal, especially through the direct air capture, for the reason I mentioned, that it helps with the synthetic fuel, so that it fits all in the same narrative or storyline. I hope that, this quick overview gave you a bit better understanding, and I think we are now moving to the questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Fabiano. It's great to see how Kühne and Nagel, how committed you are to this topic, and how structured you go about it. It's really impressive from my point of view. Fabiano, we can't see your camera is somewhat off, but we can hear you. Just to let you know. So we got a lot of now we can see you. We got a lot of questions. So I'll try to moderate a little bit to allocate the questions and to get us going. So to start off, I picked a very practical question. It's actually, I think it's for Swiss Work Cargo. So the question is, what are the options of sustainable aviation fuel for air cargo freight considering route Brazil? Import or export to Brazil? That's basically, if I get the question right, you ship something either to Brazil or from Brazil. What are then options for SAF? So just to give you an idea of what Swiss Work Cargo does here. So first of all, we launched a program that we have labeled Green Choice. So if you ship, you can do an add-on and basically say, okay, I want to add a sustainability component. And then you can choose between 3 components. You either say, I want to do sustainable aviation fuel. You want to use direct air capture. So the technology Climeworks uses or produces actually, or the classic offset, a carbon removal project basically. And you can do the combinations of these 3 elements. So you ship and you say, okay, there's, I don't know, 1 ton of shipment. I want to have the CO2 related to this shipment omitted or reduced. And then you tell us how much SAF you want to have, how much carbon offsets, or how much direct air capture and storage. So in practice, this is how this would work. You can do this either on an airway bill level or you can do it on a bulk shipment. And maybe one important point, because you mentioned this shipment to Brazil, and Fabiano, you also touched upon this in your presentation. It's kind of a virtual system. So when you do this with sustainable aviation fuel, the fuel is not on your flight to Brazil where your shipment is on, but it's in the system. It's used within the Swiss fleet on the Swiss planes, but due to infrastructure constraints, we cannot ensure that it's on your flight. But of course, you get the certification and everything to basically make clear that your shipment or the CO2 emissions related to your shipment were reduced / omitted. So that's a little bit how this works on a very high level. I don't know if Laurent or Fabiano, you want to add to this? I think it's more or less fine. Sorry.
Maybe just quickly. Yes, I mean, from what I know, at least so far, there is no physical SAF available. I might be wrong in Brazil, because I've talked to Brazilian carriers as well and looked at if it's possible. I know also that they're discussing there for a mandate to have in there, which is not based on the quantities, but I think on the reductions, and that they're trying to develop the industry there as well. Because coming from the ethanol and having the experience there as well, it makes absolutely sense. But yeah, otherwise the book and claim will probably be the easiest solution today. Also getting you the most affordable way of using it. And just, what was that? 2 weeks ago, the Science-Based Targets have released their newest update. It's a draft version on the net zero paper where they clearly include now the environmental attribute certificates, they call it, so a SAF book and claim, as we would say.
Thank you, Fabiano, for the clarification. For me, the important thing that you mentioned is the book and claim mechanism. I think that's what we have to keep in mind, and and this infrastructure and availability of SAF across the globe is really developing at different speeds. It's developing, but just at different speeds at different locations. I'll take this as a segue for a question to Fabiano. So the question is, what approach does Kühne + Nagel take to identify and integrate technological advancements in its transition to net zero transportation?
Okay, it's an interesting question. It depends a little bit what's meant, of course, with technological advancements, because being an asset light means that we cannot implement a lot of things that are directly connected to the assets. However, we work closely together with our innovation team and to identify solutions, to assess them, of course, look at which one makes sense. One example is, for example, that I mentioned before with new types of fuels. There we are not using them in our aircrafts because we don't have any aircrafts, but we can help make it a reality faster, help making it scale faster by showing a commitment and offtake. That is one possibility. The other is as I mentioned, also on the data side, so that we push for more accurate data. Doing now the pilot with IATA to then integrate it into a new product for us, a new solution for us that we can use then to leverage that data to make better decisions and optimize the entire supply chain based on that. There's a couple of other things that we try to always find. Then it's more location based, and where we have our national teams which are more focused on it, and we always need to evaluate on a larger scale. Unfortunately, there's a couple of things that are under development right now that I cannot mention, but some things we'll announce soon in terms of innovation and sustainability. We're really trying to stay on top of what's developing and see what can be our role in that, because we have a very special position, as I showed, but I think there is always a role in helping making it a reality by collaborating with our partners. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you very much. With this, I would move on to a question to Laurent. So there is actually a very specific one. So how many tons of carbon dioxide can be captured by the Iceland plant, I guess, per year?
Yeah. So the current plants we have in operation, we have two plants. The first one is Orca with a nominal capacity of 4,000 tons per year. And then we have a Mammoth with a nominal capacity of 36,000 tons of year. So usually the reaction when you speak about this and you speak about the really, and it's not the right solution. What is important to understand is that we are at the very beginning of the scale up of this industry. We are like in the 80s of the solar, of the wind industries. A few years ago, we were collecting milligrams in a lab of CO2. Now we are speaking about tens of thousands of tons. So we are on this scale up journey. On the other side, CDR will not be the silver bullet. It's to take care of what we cannot produce. But in terms of scalability, coming to 5 to 10 billion tons of CO2 removal per year is possible. The physical constraint, if you want, is having access to renewable energy. And this is something we need to build up progressively while we are on our scale-up journey.
Thank you. For me, the speed of the scale-up is really impressive. I don't fully understand the technology, but if I read it right, it's relatively new and it's developing really quickly. And so if you compare it to solar and so on, who really took off over the last 10 years, I'm really interested to see how this develops. And just to put this in perspective, if I'm not mistaken, emissions per capita in Switzerland is like around about 3.5 tons per year. So this also shows a little bit the scale and also the challenge. Then we have a tricky one for Kühne + Nagel, which I'm also very aware of. So the question is, how does Kühne + Nagel convince the customers to pay the additional costs for the usage of sustainable aviation fuels? What's the sales strategy?
That's definitely a difficult one, and one with which I would assume everyone is struggling to a certain degree. So we have seen an increase in the last years. It has been constantly going up. As I don't know for sure, assumption is there are various different reasons. Of course, the understanding, the availability, certain of the entire book and claim has become a bit more clear to a lot, because it's always a bit of process in when you first talk to a shipper about the topic, and very much in the beginning it was something completely new and it sounds wow, and then the reaction is, I didn't know that it's possible that from French fries oil that you want to throw away, you can put it into an air, develop it, put it into an aircraft, and then it flies. So they're amazed, and then they see the price and they're shocked again. And then it's a process, and then maybe they came back after 1-2 years because also checking, okay, is this price the reality? Maybe a cross check. Then they also, what they do is most likely then they want to understand a bit more the book and claim, but also it's not a decision that it's a quick decision. I assume it's a long-term decision. It needs to go into budgeting, and once you start, it cannot easily go back again. Why should you buy the sustainable aviation fuel, reduce your emission for 1 year, then the next year you don't do it anymore? Then it looks weird that you go up and down with your emissions. That's, my assumption of how most of them do it, also from talks. So it is a process. We understand that. Also, that there was no clarity in all the standards and how this is developed now. That has not helped. So this document from SBTi hopefully will help boost it a little bit more. But for us, creating this understanding, giving the information, showing what the development, being as transparent as possible, and having a system that I believe is as credible and traceable as it gets today, helps in convincing. But at the end of the day, we need to also understand it comes at a cost, and it's very expensive. It is. There's unfortunately no way around it. We help with that, hopefully, that with the scaling, that the prices will come down, that also with certain incentives that we try to use the on the parts of the world where there is the best pricing available. But it comes at the cost, and that cost needs to be covered. And unless it's just regulation, as we're seeing now in Europe, that says, hey, it's what you need to have in there, there's no way around it, then there needs to be a willingness to pay from, at the end of the day, also from the end customer, because in small quantities still possible, but in large quantities becomes very difficult. It's neither the airline nor the freight forwarder is able to pay those additional costs, because that's part of the service that they're offering. It's part of their production cost, if you will, and that the selection to move via air is with the cargo owner, so also there the decision on why those emissions also happen. But yeah, then there's different. Also, I think we need to look at it differently. Also, what kind of customer is it? Because certain where they have high margins and higher value goods, it's maybe easier because from the cost perspective, it's not that important. So making that also understandable. While for others, especially perishables, where there's a lot of goods moved around the world, there it's very difficult because the cost competitiveness is very high and every additional cost. And there, I think we're also struggling still to find a good solution of how to make it available. But we need to create something to show them the value added and how it's also to their customer value added, that at the end there is a willingness to pay. And one more thing, what is I think an advantage, a lot of companies struggle with Scope 3 emissions, with measuring it and with having reductions in place. That's the beauty of the book and claim, and in the transportation in general, it's much easier, much more accurate to have the emissions, and there is a solution to reduce them now. So that's also showing that, making that understandable. If you want to do something, there is something. That has helped also in the past, but then try to take them by the hand and show them what the possibilities are. But still, the reality is we are at the very small quantities globally on what is produced, but also on the willingness to pay. And that's going to be the big question to answer for everyone. So we try from different angles, different approaches, showing different views, and how this can help and why it makes sense.
Thank you very much for this honest answer. And just to give you my add-on to this, we struggle with the same thing. How do you sell this? And for me, it's basically 5 drivers. It's about understanding what the customer wants and why would he pay. For me, it's 5 things. Either a company does it on a purely ethical motivation, so I want to do something for the environment. It's part of a corporate citizenship program that they say, hey, this is how I position the company and this is what I want to do. It can be due to end customer pressure. So if you ship jewelry, for instance, if it's expensive jewelry, if it's then sold, you can say, hey, this was produced and transported carbon neutral. It can be due to investor pressure because companies have to submit certain reports and so on and promise something to their shareholders. Or it's part of an innovation program that they want to be at the forefront of something that has been developing further on. So for us, if we identify what kind of drivers are present with the customer, then we can see how much willingness to pay there is for such programs. But in the end, and you both mentioned this, it's a problem of scale. At some point, if scale is achieved similar to solar, prices should come down. So with this, it's my last words. It's 11 o'clock. So I would close the webinar. First of all, thank you very much, Fabiano and Laurent, to take the time. It was really a pleasure listening to you, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and for collaborating with Swiss Work Cargo on this topic. On the questions we haven't answered, and there's a lot, we will get back to you on the questions via email. Just give us a little time and then follow up. And with this, I would close. And Fabiano, Laurent, merci beaucoup.
Thanks a lot, Gabe.
Thank you for having us.
Dankeschön. Schönen Tag miteinander.